Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another Cambridge podcast. As always, I'm very, very happy and excited to be here with all of you. Today is going to be a really good podcast because we're actually going to cover part 4 of how to avoid the 4 pitfalls of retirement. We've done 1, 2, and 3. In the first one, obviously, we talked about the risk of living too long. In part 2, we talked about the risk of living with a disability, and we covered a lot of the issues and concerns that many of you have been asking questions about. Then in part 3, we discussed how to avoid the risk of living with eroding factors like taxes, inflation, stock market volatility, interest rate volatility, propensity to consume, lawsuits, financial fees, and so forth. So we've done quite a bit of work in the last 3 weeks in identifying the 4 pitfalls that Americans are going to have to deal with in the future. And I can share with you that today we're going to do part 4, or the last part of it, which is going to be the risk of dying too soon. And obviously that's a major issue that many of my clients address on a regular basis, and most of you need to pay attention to. Now, I think what you'll find very interesting about the risk of dying too soon is that the vast majority of Americans, number one, are not prepared for retirement. Number 2, they don't have the protection necessary in order to mitigate and avoid all of the different issues and concerns that may come your way and that of your family when you have a premature death from a business perspective. So those are things that I want to start talking to all of you about today, because I can assure you that the more life insurance protection that you have in retirement, the better off your retirement is going to be. And I'm going to walk you through the process of how it is that we in our firm look at the risk of dying too soon, and what are some of the things that we recommend that all of you should be considering when it comes to managing and asserting yourself for the benefit of yourself, your family, and your business, is something like the risk of dying too soon were to happen in the future. Obviously, you know, those are things that are very critical for all of us. So I want to spend a little bit of time today in this podcast to kind of walk you through the importance of protecting yourself and your family against that risk. Now, first of all, one of the first things that I can share with you in regards to the risk of dying too soon is the fact that I have never met a widow that did not believe in life insurance. And I've been in the industry now almost 30 years. So because of the type of business that we do and the type of planning that we do for our clients, I have delivered a number of death claims for a number of my clients that have actually suffered a premature death. And when you suffer a premature death, obviously your family is going to suffer because of the emotional state that they're going to find themselves in when someone that they know, care, and love, passes away unexpectedly from that perspective. But then the financial side of it is going to hit that family at some point in time in the future. And what I can tell you about retirement and retirement distribution planning is that although I deal with clients that are middle class, upper middle class, and the upscale marketplace, very, very few of the families that I deal with have saved enough money in order for them to be able to live throughout their retirement lives without having to have life insurance. Because many a times, life insurance is going to play a number of different roles in your retirement success. Number one is going to provide that guaranteed death benefit upon a premature death. Think of life insurance dollars, or the purchase of a life insurance contract, as money in escrow. and escrow closes the day someone dies. So if you really think of life insurance as purchasing dollars at a discount, then obviously at the point in time that your family may need those dollars the most, then those dollars are going to be available. And if you do it the right way, those dollars are going to be available on a tax-preferred and on a tax-free basis. Now, what can those dollars do? Many of the clients that we engage for the first time, have not done proper planning. And whenever we engage clients in creating a customized tax planning blueprint, we look at the four major pitfalls of retirement, and we do it in such a way that we can actually provide protection against it. So the risk of living too long, the risk of living with a disability, the risk of living with eroding factors like we talked about a little bit ago, and last but not least, the risk of dying too soon. Those are things that are very, very critical for every American family in the United States. And if you're able to mitigate those risks, then your retirement life is going to be full of envy from many of your friends and other family members, because you would have gone above and beyond what most Americans will fail to do in the future. So those are things that you need to pay attention to. Now, the other consideration when you look at life insurance from an asset protection standpoint is that it can be used in a number of different ways. And we'll spend more time, or we have already spent good quality time in dealing with these issues and some of the other podcasts that we have done in this series that we're covering the last part of today. But when someone dies, and if you happen to be in retirement and you're married, your surviving spouse is going to have the ability to take over the highest Social Security benefit. But most families, when they prepare for retirement, they don't think about, Social Security replacement planning. And because of the fact that upon the death of one of the members of that family, yes, the surviving spouse may pick up the higher Social Security benefit, he or she will actually lose one of those Social Security benefits. So therefore, when you have families that are dependent on two Social Security incomes coming in and all of a sudden one of them goes away, having proper Social Security replacement planning through the use of a life insurance contract will now help that family mitigate that risk by replacing that Social Security benefit that was lost upon the first death with a tax-free income that is received from the death benefit proceed. At that point in time, the surviving spouse can either take that money that just came in tax-free, put it into a savings account, invest that money. They can purchase an annuity, an immediate annuity that will guarantee that replacement of Social Security benefits lost until the death of that second family member. So life insurance becomes more of an asset protection than anything else when it comes to Social Security replacement. The other issue that life insurance does for the vast majority of my clients, and as I stated at the very beginning of this podcast, the vast majority of Americans have not saved enough during their retirement, during their pre-retirement years, in order to mitigate what they're going to have to deal with in retirement. And the reason for that is twofold. Americans are living a lot longer today than ever before. And in part one, we talked about the risk of living too long and the fact that, when you retire at the age of 65, which is typically the age that Americans are thinking about retiring today, although many of my clients are now postponing retirement for years past the age of 65, it is important to note that you need to be able to plan for at least 3 decades of retirement. And I call those 3 decades of retirement the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So because of the fact that you may retire at the age of 65, for the first 10 years in retirement, those are what I consider the go-go years. Then between the ages of 75 and 85, those would be the slow-go years. You may not be as healthy as you once were. And then once you get into your mid-80s, you go into the no-go years where, your number one goal is to try to stay as healthy as you possibly can, and most important, try to wake up on the green side of the grass every day until that day when you're going to pass away. Many of you and many of the clients that I deal with, and many Americans are living past the age of 95. So you got to be able to plan for 3 years of retirement, because if running out of money is bad in retirement and getting old, running out of money before you run out of life can be really, really bad. So life insurance plays a major role, because at the point in time that someone dies, that would provide some additional assets that now the surviving spouse can utilize in order to maintain his or her standard of living from a business perspective. Now, also consider that because of the fact that people are living a lot longer today, that means that there's a higher susceptibility for long-term care issues and concerns in the future. So as a matter of fact, if you're married filing jointly, husband and wife, age 65, and both of you are fairly healthy, there's a 75% probability that one of you is going to need long-term care at some point in time in the future. The problem with that is that if you have not done proper long-term care planning and you have not been able to safeguard against the risk of living with a disability, someone that may utilize long-term care prior to death may actually have no choice but to invade principal, or the principal and the interest that you had set aside for retirement, and therefore you may be running out of money a lot sooner because of the fact that now you have to pay more, or you have a much higher expense due to the expenses of long-term care, which are now very, very high. Currently in 2019, you can now fast forward what that cost is going to be 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years down the line. So if you don't have that proper planning, and many of my clients, because of the different features and benefits that the new life insurance contracts are offering, many of my clients are purchasing life insurance contracts that come with a long-term care rider or a critical illness rider that will allow the clients to actually invade a portion or all of their death benefit in order to mitigate the additional cost of a long-term care, thus not having to put additional pressure on the retirement assets that the clients have for the rest of their lives. So there are a lot of issues that you need to consider when it comes to the acquisition of life insurance from a business perspective, whether it is to replace Social Security benefits at some point in time in the future, to mitigate the risk of a disability, long-term care, whatever that may be. Also, many a times, remember, when you get to retirement, it's not about the accumulation rate anymore. It is all about the distribution rate. And the challenge that many of my clients have and have had for many years is that because of the fact that the vast majority of Americans are not saving enough assets for retirement, they are forced pretty much to live on an interest-only withdrawal from their accounts because of the fact that if they need to start dipping into principal early in retirement, then obviously they're reducing their overall standard of living. And if they live long enough, at the time that the first person dies, there may not be any income left to provide any retirement income to the surviving spouse. So in many different ways, you're disinheriting that liability. On the other hand, if you have a properly structured life insurance contract that can mitigate the risk of dying too soon by providing protection against disability, protection against Social Security replacement, and also protection to maximize asset replacement, whereby now, because of the fact that there's a death benefit in place or there is money in escrow that will pay out upon the first death or the death of one of the two individuals in the marriage, then now the family has a lot more flexibility in their retirement distribution planning. You see, if you have, let's say, and I'm going to use round numbers to make the math easier, if you have $1 million in a retirement account, you can probably only pull out under best circumstances because of distribution rate. You may only be able to pull out anywhere between 3 and 4% per year to maintain your standard of living. So that means that $1 million portfolio can only generate or you can only distribute anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 of income in retirement, unless you want to pull more. But if you start to pull more, then now the susceptibility of you running out of money before you run out of life then is a lot higher than if you live off the interest only. But then again, as you get older, obviously inflation and taxation, we all know what's going to happen with that in the future, is going to start eating away those $30,000 to $40,000. So 10, 15, 20 years from now, the $30,000 to $40,000 that you are receiving today is not going to purchase near enough in 20 years what is doing today. So obviously the opportunity cost and inflation rate is going to catch up, and then obviously, you know, what percentage of those assets are going to be taxable and at what rate, based on the fact that there's a very, very high probability that taxes are going to be much greater in the future than they are today. But if in addition to having that $1 million retirement asset, could be in an IRA, could be in a mutual fund, could be in a 401k, whatever it may be, could be in a Roth account, if now, in addition to that, you have $1 million of guaranteed death benefit on the side, sitting in escrow, waiting for that first person to die, now that family has a lot more leverage. And one of the leverage that the family has is not only do they now have the ability to distribute interest, but they can also distribute principal. Why? Because even if they distribute enough principal to bring down that account significantly, at the first death, then the $1 million death benefit that would be paid out to the surviving spouse on a tax-free basis, that will replace all that income, all that principal and interest that was used and that was able to generate a much better standard of living during that period of time that both husband and wife were living. So for instance, based on, and again, it all depends at what age you want to retire and when are you going to start taking distribution out of your retirement accounts. And for each and every one of you, those numbers are going to be different. But let's say on $1 million of assets in a retirement account, if you do proper calculation and you start doing immediate payouts, taking principal and interest, you can actually have a distribution rate of up to 8% in a best case scenario. So compare that to a 3 to 4%. That means that instead of you generating $30,000 to $40,000 of income in retirement, now you have the ability to generate between $70,000 and $80,000 of income in retirement. And if you choose to do so, you can do it on a guaranteed basis until someone dies. Doesn't that give you a much better rate of return on the distribution rate? Wouldn't you rather live on $80,000 of income a year versus $40,000 an income per year? How much more can you do for yourself? How much more can you do for your family? How much better would your retirement life be if you have proper asset protection and asset insurance in place in order to mitigate all of those things that are going to be happening to you in the future? Because one of the things that we need to be careful about and we need to plan for are the what I call, the life happens situations in life. Things are going to happen along those lines. Everyone that plans for retirement, they think that they're going to retire, their home is going to be paid for, so obviously they're going to be saving money. You're not going to save any money in retirement because basically what you're doing is when your houses and your home is paid for, that money that you were putting away every single month for to pay down your mortgage or for the mortgage payments are now going to be reallocated to other things like health insurance or health care or meeting certain other issues and concerns that are going to happen to you. What if you have a family member that gets sick? What if you have a son or a daughter or a granddaughter or a grandson that gets sick? And now you need to start helping out financially. So whenever I plan for retirement, 30 years is a long ways. And 30 years is a long time. A lot of things can happen along those lines. So, when you really start thinking about the risk of dying too soon and what that can do to your family, and by the way, the risk of dying too soon can apply even before you retire. Because what if you happen to be 55 years of age, you've been putting money away for your family and for yourself because you want to retire in 10 years. All of a sudden you don't wake up the next day because tomorrow is promised to no one. Then the big question is, well, what is your family going to do now if you happen to be the breadwinner and you're no longer around? How's your income going to be replaced? Do you have enough income replacement protection to be able to mitigate those issues that your family are going to have to deal with, for the rest of their lives? So again, when it comes to a protection scheme, it is very important to understand that the better job you do in planning your retirement distribution and in planning your retirement from a risk management perspective, the better off you're going to be able to do in your life and in your retirement life for yourself and your family. Now, the next question is, well, Bert, what are some of the products and services that are available in the marketplace? And there are many of them. Now, obviously, for each and every one of you, the decision is going to be totally different. Number one, how much life insurance do you need to purchase? That's a big issue. And I always look at the replacement of life insurance not necessarily based on needs, but based on income replacement and based on the value of a human life. And for that, we perform human life value calculations. So we need to figure out exactly based on your goals and objectives and where you're at financially and where do you want to be in the future, then what would be the adequate amount of life insurance that needs to be owned in order to mitigate all of those issues and concerns that I have been talking about since I started doing this podcast. The other question now becomes, okay, so once we identify the type of insurance, the amount of insurance that we're going to have, let's say, as an example, we need to purchase $1 million of death benefit to have in escrow somewhere, then the next question is, well, what type of product are we going to purchase? Are we going to purchase term insurance? If we're going to do so, it's going to be a 10-year level term, 15 years, 20, 25, 30 years. Is it going to be term to 100? It really depends. Now, longevity planning is something that we do a lot of work with. We go to the extreme of trying to figure out, how much longevity do you have in your family? Again, anything can happen at any given point in time because tomorrow is promised to no one. But, if your parents lived a long life, if your grandparents lived a long life, are you a smoker? Are you a non-smoker? Do you exercise? Are you heavy? Are you in good shape? What are some of the things that you're doing in order to have a much better health in retirement? Then that would determine the type of policy that we may purchase. Many a times, depending on all the different issues that we need to address, we do what we call life insurance straddles. We purchase term insurance. We purchase guaranteed universal life insurance policies, which are primarily designed as a term to age 100 or even longer than that. We may do some index if we want to create supplemental retirement plans. So we may also do a combination with whole life, in which we use many times as a supplemental retirement plan because of all the features and benefits that 7702 plans have when it comes to tax planning and retirement distribution planning. So now that we know that we need to purchase $1 million of death benefit, we also know what percentage we're going to use for asset replacement. So let's say 50% of $500,000 is going to be used as an asset replacement product, and then the other $500,000 is going to be used as a supplemental retirement plan. So obviously we're going to use different products depending on what we need to mitigate from point A to point B. The third area that you need to consider is, now that you know the death benefit amounts and you also know how you're going to break it up from a product perspective, which company are you going to use? Now, not every company can be the very best at everything, so there are companies that specialize in whole life. Other companies specialize in guaranteed universal life or index universal life. Other companies are companies that do a very good job in their term products. So understanding what it is that you need to, what risk you need to cover yourself against and what you need to mitigate will dictate which company you're going to use. Now, we have always been an independent firm, so that means that we have access to all the major companies in the marketplace. So we're really not married to any one firm. We're actually married to our clients. So whenever we engage a client in creating a customized tax planning blueprint that addresses the 4 major pitfalls that our clients are going to be facing in the future, then we do our due diligence to go out into the marketplace and identify which are the proper carriers and the services that they provide that would be suitable to mitigate those issues that each and every one of our clients has on an ongoing basis. And again, as I have stated before, every client is different because every client is a different world. So having the proper protection itself is paramount if you really have, if you really want to have a top-notch retirement distribution and protection strategy for you, your family, and your business. By the way, if you happen to own a business, you need to have also buy-sell agreements in order to replace that income on behalf of your family if you can't wake up tomorrow morning and go perform the duties and the services you've been doing so well for many, many years in running your business. So you also need to have business exit strategies in place along those lines. So as you can see, we have covered in all 4 parts of how to avoid the 4 pitfalls in retirement. The first one that we did, we talked about the risk of living too long, and we went into some details as to the things that need to be considered. Part 2, we did the risk of living with a disability and the challenges and opportunities that proper planning do for you and your family. In part 3, we talked about the eroding factors, taxes, inflation, opportunity cost, stock market volatility, interest rate volatility, lawsuits, and so forth. And then in this part, I have given you a lot of information regarding planning opportunities for you and your family when it comes to managing and avoiding the pitfall of having a premature death and dying too soon. So again, just wanted to take a few minutes today to cover some of these issues. And as I always say at the end of every single podcast and webinar and seminars that we do on an ongoing basis, my number one goal is to help you change the way that you see things. Because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So again, thank you so very much for giving me a few minutes of your time today. I'm looking forward to spending more and more quality time with you for the rest of the year, every single week as we do. And I'll talk to you next week again. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.